was watching a video where they said characters in this game were too mean, and I was like, I've had it worse in real life. This is tame. Yeah, this game is pretty tame. I guess they might be reacting to the fact that they form a lynch mob to try to kill you based on nothing but a rumor from a completely non-credible source of information who has a reputation for like being a professional hater, which is reasonable. But then you think about it for 2 seconds if you have any sociological imagination, and you realize people are as stupid or more stupid than that in real life. So no, I think this game is pretty tame. You know, I'm still not going to take any jobs from the mailbox. People where I said hello there and they're like, how dare you exist? Yeah, you know, I have actually, this is an opportunity to tell some stories about phone banking where, okay, I did a little bit of phone banking for Zoran Mamdani. Not as much as I would have liked, but a little bit. Enough to form some experiences, to have some experience talking to people in New York on the other side of the line. This was back when I lived in the DC area, of course. And most of the calls that I have where people picked up, they were pretty nice. Or if they were, I think a couple of people disproportionately... People who sounded like English would be their second language were a little bit more incredulous. That's perfectly fine and understandable. I tried to do it one time. I'm horrible at reading scripts. That is okay. You just have to be earnest and like believe in what you're talking about. You'll get it eventually. And the most important thing is that you are genuine in your belief, because people hate listening to a salesperson that they think is sleazy and doesn't believe in anything except for getting them to buy some shit. You know, I used to be not very good at reading that script either. The trick is you don't actually read the script. The script is just a set of guardrails. As long as you hit some general beats when you're phone banking, it's all good. But nonetheless, over the time that I did phone banking, I called a couple. I've had a few conversations, most recently with the Mamdani campaign, and I think I did a couple for Katie Wilson, actually. Again, not as many as I would have liked. For the most part, people were great. People were chill. But you get the occasional really angry person, and especially with an anonymized setting over the phone, they are not afraid to just lay into you. There was one guy on the other end of the line that started, you know, that I think this was my first time ever being cursed out on a phone bank, was when I was phone banking for Zoran Mamdani, and some angry conservative on the other end of the line started doing that. Funny enough, that was the first call for me. Yeah, look, they say first impressions last a lifetime, and what a first impression to make, but I assure you the vast majority of your phone calls are not going to go like that, which is good, I think. And then the one that really got me, right? There's one that really got me on the negative side of things, and then there's one that I think was a profoundly positive experience, and I'll tell both of those stories if I can. First one I want to tell, the really negative experience that I actually consider a personal victory that I was able to contain myself, was I called somebody. This was, I think, after the primary. And they said they would probably vote for Cuomo. The person who picked up on the other end of the line, this guy was a landlord. I had to convince a landlord who wanted to increase the rent for rent stabilized units to vote for Mamdani. And I got damn close to convincing this guy too, because I was trying to think about it like, look, obviously this is good for everybody in the city, but this landlord, in my head I'm thinking, okay, this landlord obviously is fucking evil, so they don't give a shit about any of the rent stabilized tenants or tenants in general that use their buildings, that live in their buildings. They just care about whether they can make expenses and come away with a profit each month, regardless of whether they have to evict some single mother making like $40,000 a year, right? So I tried to argue from the angle that, like, look, the ability of people to make rent consistently is going to make your life much more stable. And if there's more housing, that's going to make housing costs less expensive, which I know you fucking hate because you're a landlord. I didn't say that directly, but I was thinking in my head, but that's going to bring down costs everywhere. The funny thing is, when you improve the quality of life You improve everybody's quality of life. You're not like, in my head, I want to so badly say, buddy, you are not struggling for income. You own 3 buildings. But I busted out my knowledge of urban economics to the extent that I have read on such matters. I busted out my knowledge of rent control policy and contracting, and how fucking local governments absolutely suck ass now because of how much is delegated to private contractors and subcontractors, so that like infinite money gets sunk into projects for none of the results. And, you know, use that to say, look, if you cut out those contractors, you cut out a lot of those middlemen, things are going to get a lot cheaper. And at the end of it, I damn near convinced him. I in fact heard him say, you know what? You know, I will think about it because you're making reasonable arguments, or whatever, right? Or something to that extent. Did he actually consider it? No, I don't think so. But I think he at least came away with the impression that, like, I can't attack this person for hating me and everything that I stand for, even though I do hate him and everything that he stands for. Because the first and foremost thing on my mind was, how do I convince this person? Like, I want Mamdani to win because he would genuinely just be good for the city. You know, I want life to get better, and when that's the foot you're putting forward, it's kind of hard for people to hate you for that. It was a profoundly taxing experience talking to a landlord, trying to convince them to vote for a socialist who professedly does not like landlords, and I don't like them either. So yeah, when people like that exist in the real world, it's kind of difficult to argue that, like, a children's video game like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, even if in the game it occurs that there is a lynch mob that tries to kill you over basically nothing, that is way more tame than the real world. Because in the real world, there are people who will sink, like, a not insignificant percentage of their entire life and probably the majority of their entire economic capital that they accumulate through their life, specifically to prevent life from getting better for other people that have less of said capital than them. Right? Like, these people are more evil than you could even like, they are evil in ways that it's almost impossible to depict a cartoon character as being. And fundamentally, the characters in Pokemon are cartoon characters. They're written in the context of children's media, right? And there's a certain degree of complexity that it's actually very hard to write for stuff like that. So the villains of children's media will almost universally be less evil than random normal, quote unquote, normal people in the real world, if they have reactionary interests. Does that make sense? That was a profoundly negative experience that I still walked away with some kind of personal victory after doing phone banking, because holy shit, I wanted so badly to crash out, but I knew that, like, I'm representing the campaign. I gotta contain myself, because objective number one is New York City has to be saved from these fuckers, and in order to do that, I have to play ball with them so I can pretend that I don't actually want their heads on a silver platter. The really good experience that I had was actually, it surprisingly has some overlap and similarity with me talking about, like, talking to somebody who wasn't very convinced to vote for Zoran Mamdani. It was an abundance person. This was back when abundance liberalism was still a thing that anybody took, like, remotely seriously. But here, let me go visit some people. Where is Ingles? There he is. Oh yeah, I actually want to I want to see something here. I remember it was earlier on in the Zoran Mamdani campaign. I think it was actually in the lead up to the primary that that I got connected to somebody on the other line. They ended up being an abundance pro, which is like a centrist lib type, and they were like, yes, build more affordable housing and shit, right? And or rather, not even just build more affordable housing, but like build more things, right? That was their main position. And I actually managed to I managed to actually appeal to them along the abundance kind of line, where it's like, yes, we should build more things. I appealed to their, what I assumed they would be like very data driven, or at least they've constructed a political identity where they want to feel like they're smarter than everybody else. So I brought out a subject where I'm almost positive I'm more intelligent than 99% of people in this country, which is affordable housing. I've read about a half dozen studies, or actually I think it's closer to 10 at this point, studies specifically on models of affordable housing and economic policymaking that is feasible for funding said affordable housing and keeping rents down. Shocker. Economists really don't want to fucking admit this, but rent control works. Sorry if I hurt anybody's feelings, but facts don't care about your feelings. When you do rent control, it does actually control the rent. The one thing about that is that it is, if anything, from the studies that I read, the issue with rent control is that it doesn't go far enough and also has to be complemented by other things. It's a yes and. If you just do rent control, then yeah, obviously landlords are going to sandbag any and all expenses in protest. So how do you fix that? Well, you could do a couple things. And again, these are not like mutually exclusive with each other. You could have the local government or the state government or whatever seize the stock of housing, thereby pushing the middlemen in the form of landlords out of the picture, so that way there's nobody to sandbag those costs. It's the responsibility of the state to maintain that, the same way they would maintain roads, sidewalks, street lamps, etc. And that would, that complementing rent control with that would undoubtedly, go a long distance to solve the rent crisis. But I didn't bring that up because this is an abundance person who probably loves privatization, and fucking hates any sort of, regulation, neoliberal brain. So instead what I brought up is that you can do rent control. You can stabilize rents, and you can build more affordable housing. And affordable housing is actually a legal designation, which means you can't raise those rents more than a certain amount. If you build more housing, you appeal to the sort of market demand cycle, but you have the thumb of the state weighing on that market demand with rent control, with rent stabilization, then you can actually increase the proportion of rent stabilized or rent controlled units to market rate units. That'll actually have an effect on how high rent is for everybody else. If you build more housing and do rent control, that will not just control the rent for the rent controlled units, it will bring rents down for the entire city, for the entire area for whom that housing construction is relevant, right? This was borne out in numerous studies. There's no this is much more in line. Even the economists that hate rent control will acknowledge this, right? This is as solid as it gets in the academic consensus of the social sciences, right? And so that's what Zoran wants to do. Meanwhile, Andrew Cuomo is over here, was over here, El Bozo, he lost, generating their housing proposal with AI, and it just didn't make any sense. They weren't saying or doing anything, but Zoran clearly is much more in line with the academic consensus, how you would actually fix a rent crisis, right? So using the data to appeal to this person's intellectual or potentially even faux intellectual sort of sophist sensibilities, I convinced an abundance person to vote for Zoran Mamdani, potentially, or to at least seriously consider it. And I got the impression that they did seriously consider it. And I know I've talked a lot of shit about this person because that was like my innermost thoughts at the moment. But ultimately, I was actually super happy that they were willing to consider that. I was super happy that they actually listened. I was like, oh shit, they actually do care. Because a lot of the abundance people actually do just want to feel like they're smarter than you. But it's not common that you get somebody that's receptive to that kind of discussion. So that was a really, really nice experience that I had on the on the phones when I was phone banking for Zoran Mamdani. Something that, again, I didn't do that many times. I think I only did 2 or 3 phone banks, and that was one of them. But it was nice. It was very nice. But that was a really nice experience that I had, and those were probably the most negative and most positive experiences I've had on a phone bank. Apart from some other instances on other campaigns where I actually helped people register to vote. Heard about the goofy stuff that happened? You're gonna have to be more specific. I've heard about several goofy things. But yeah, actually, that might even be... I've not heard about that one. Drop a link to like a news article or something. I could talk about that. I don't know. Maybe I'll make that a video. Maybe I won't. But I think more people should do phone banking, particularly for progressive candidates, for left-leaning candidates, because they are the only people who have a real affirmative vision for their city, their state, the country, whatever. And it's just nice when people care about stuff enough to, you know, advocate over it, advocate for it, you know, over the phone or whatever, in an earnest way to try to change things, right? Phone banking is one of the few ways that I can actually firmly say that I've made a difference. I phone bank, you know, the 2 pivotal Wisconsin Supreme Court elections that happened in 2023 and then 2025 earlier this year. I phone banked for both of those. And that is one respect in which I can happily say that I made a difference. I prevented a couple of like extreme right-wing judges from getting elected, or at least I helped in the very widespread efforts from progressive organizing groups, preventing like far-right judges who notably really do not like abortion or women's rights in general get elected in Wisconsin. And no money was involved in any of it. It was just me, a couple hours, and you know, an online phone dialer and talking to people. You know, the right wing has money, but the left has people power. That is the probably biggest strength of the left, is unparalleled people power. But yeah, phone banking is based because it means you care enough to advocate for stuff. Cut the segment.
Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.